And don't want to fix it alone? Call RVFix to get virtual assistance from a certified technician today.
Hi, this is Kevin with RVFix. Today we're going to be installing a weight distribution hitch. The one we are doing today is a Blue Ox Track Pro, but for this installation it's just to give you a good general idea of what you'll be looking at installing a weight distribution. There are a lot of different kinds for different setups, different types of trailers, things like that. So keep that in mind as we go over everything we're doing today for the specific hitch that you end up with, to read your instructions, because it might be a different measurement here or there that you need to check on there. Another thing that's really important, all trucks are going to be different. As you're installing your hitch, you'll want to make sure if there's any specific things it's mentioning truck wise. The one we're doing on today is a Dodge. It does have the coil over springs, so when we do end up setting ball height, we're going to be a little bit higher than what we normally would, and we'll kind of go over that when we do that part as well. So beginning with the install, the first thing you want to do is get the trailer as level as possible. Starting with that, you want to be on, as level as ground as possible as well. We don't really want to be somewhere that's really far off front to back. It's going to make it hard to get our measurements correct. But the way I like to get my measurements is I'm just going to measure from the ground to the bottom of the frame, in front of your front axle, and then behind the back axle. So just take our tape measure from the ground. Right there we are looking at 22.5 to pretty much the center of the lip of that frame. And then, like I said, we just come around to the back, and we're going to do the same thing behind the back axle. And right there we are about a 1/16 of an inch off, but we're right about there at our 22.5 to the lip of that frame. Once you have the trailer to your level point, the next measurement we're going to take is going to be to the top of our coupler right here. That is where your trailer should be riding to ride level. And we're just going to go from the ground to the top of that coupler, and you can see we're looking at about 21.5 right there to the top of our coupler. So now that we have those measurements on our hitch, the next part we're going to do is our saddle. The saddles are the pieces that our sway bars are actually going to ride in on the trailer. Again, it will be different depending on the type of hitch you do. Ours today is going to be measuring for the middle of our saddle. We're going to go from the middle of the coupler back this way. We have a play area of 20 to 25 inches is the sweet spot we want this saddle to be riding in. So we're just going to go from about middle of the coupler. So 25, there's a mark on the frame right there. If that's not good enough, we do have little, so we just want to make a mark right there at your 25 from the center of the coupler. And that, for this style of saddle, is going to be the furthest back you want to go with them. Trying to go any farther forward, we have our propane tanks in the way, and that does happen on some units the way they're set up and the type of hitch you have. You may end up where your furthest limit is going to interfere with your propane tanks. The only thing you can do at that point is to actually, you can take your propane tanks off and move your propane carrier a little bit forward to give you the space to clear right there, or using a different type of hitch, because you don't want to be outside of your clearances that are listed in your instructions for whichever type of hitch you're installing. With that being said though, we'll put these brackets on there loosely just to see how everything fits with that mark right there. So on this style, we're just going to have a rear bracket and a front bracket that's going to mount on there. We're going to want to put it on to where these holes are going to be lined up with each other. We're going to use the top bolt first to kind of hang it down on there, and then depending on where this lines up to the bottom is where we're going to want to put our bottom bolt for mounting. On the back side of this as well, if you take a look, there are a few things that are ran on the back side of the frame. So you want to make sure again that you're not really interfering. It's not interfering, so I'm sliding underneath that so that we are not pinching anything, propane line, electrical wires, anything like that. We do not want to pinch anything when we suck this hitch down. So like I said, hanging it by the top bolt, and then the lowest bolt hole we can do is going to be the very bottom hole, is all that's open on there. So we're going to slide this in there, line it up front to back, and then if we kind of just hold this in place, we can see this is where our measurement needs to be. This is where our L bracket's going to actually mount, and we should be able to fit it right there at our 25 inches. So I'm going to loosely put on the locking nuts on the back of these as well, just so everything's set up on there nice and loose. And then the next piece that's going to go on there, like I said, this is going to be the L bracket. This is what our tension bar actually rides on these saddles, on this setup right here. So on this one, on this specific instructions, it does say to leave your top hole open. So when we're setting it up, just leaving that top hole open right there, we're going to be riding in that position, going in those two holes. And if we need to, when we do our final testing and setup, putting the tension bars on there, if we need to adjust without adjusting the ball height, if the bars don't seem like they're riding right, we can adjust some by moving this bracket up or down as well. But just for the beginning position, we're just going to throw the bolts back in there now, just starting them by hand. And also on this blue ox, this is one I've seen on the instructions for this guy. It does call when your final setup that it calls for blue Loctite on these bolts holding your L brackets on right here as well. The back, these bolts mounting this part of the bracket do not. They got the lock nuts on the back of those. Alrighty, so now we're just going to try to keep that lined up. I'm going to tighten up these back bolts a little bit. What I'm using, I do just have an impact with a 3/4 inch socket and a 3/4 inch wrench for holding the bolt. You don't necessarily have to have the power tools. If you had a ratchet and socket and a wrench will work just the same, or 2 wrenches, it just take you a little bit longer. But I'm just going to start tightening these down a little bit to the point where I can kind of hold it in place where it's straight up and down. Another thing with these as well, I didn't tighten that top one to pinch yet. You don't want to do just one bolt all the way tight and then the other one, because you're going to kind of bend the bracket on these. Okay, like I say, yeah, we just get it lined up where we're going to be riding right there. And then I'll go ahead and get these other bolts tightened up on here. A little bit on there. So once we have this bracket installed nice and tight, we got our bolts onto here. These ones, they do call for 78 foot-pounds of torque on there, so you will need a torque wrench. And then we are just going to set up, depending on your style of torque wrench, they make a lot of different ones, but we would just have ours was just a rotating one. We set it to that 78 foot-pounds, and we're going to take our 3/4 inch socket, and we're going to torque these guys down real quick. Just like that. I'm going to do this bottom one just like that, and I'm just going to do them one more time after that bottom one's been tightened. Still good. Still good. So just like that. After the saddles have been set up on your unit, the next thing that's going to come in is going to be actually setting up the hitch head on the back of the truck at the proper height. So when we measured this one, it was 21.5 to coupler height. We're going to get this guy, this being a Dodge, specific to the instructions for this hitch, recommend 2 inches over where we measure our coupler height. So we're going to set this up at 23.5 inches, right there as close as we can get, and test it from that point. And this stinger is reversible up or down. All right, now that we got our saddles installed on the trailer, coupler height, we go ahead and get our stinger on the truck, and we're going to set up the ball height on here to get us riding correct. So on this particular hitch, we're going to have a couple bolts, the 4 washers that come through on these as well, and then our nuts for that. And then this little guy right here is what we adjust the pitch of our ball. We just got the 4 washers on there. That's pretty standard for setting the tilt of your ball on most of these. So to begin, we're going to just put this in the hole right on there on the back of the head of the stinger. And then we're going to take this guy and we're going to set it on here and measure roughly that we're in the right spot before we start tightening anything up. There we go. So, and remember, the measurement you're taking is to the top of that ball height. I am holding it up in place just to simulate when this is tightened down where we should be sitting. Right there is about 23.25. Our ball height on our coupler height on there for riding level was 21.5. Specific to this instructions on this, it recommends with the Dodge that we're going to go 2 inches higher than what our coupler height was, just to help even everything out. You will want to check instructions, but generally speaking, the Dodges, you're about 2 inches off of what this height was. Most other trucks, you're usually going to be about an inch or so above what your coupler height measurement was. So now that we got that measured, we're going to take our other bolt, keep setting this up. Washers on this setup, all four of my big washers are exactly the same, so there's no positioning for them. Different styles of weight distribution hitches might have special washers for top or bottom. Just follow your instructions, they'll tell you what position they go in. So we're just going to get those on there. Then we have our nuts, same thing, these are not locking, nylock, anything like that. So we're just going to go ahead and get them started on there by hand. Okay, so once those are on there, the first thing you're going to actually tighten up is just this set bolt right down here. This is what actually picks this up into place. So we want to make sure you tighten this before you actually snug these down. If we snug these down and then try to tighten that, we're fighting against where we just pinch this by tightening up those side right there. On this particular one, it's a 15/16. What we're going to use to tighten that up. And honestly, I'm just going to tighten it by hand until we're snugged up against there, and then I'm just going to bump it with the impact gun. And you do see after hand tighten it, and then when I snug it up, it actually did lift it just a little bit. But like I said, yeah, we just get it nice and snugged up there. And then we're going to tighten down our actual bolts holding us onto the stinger. On this particular hitch, we're just using a 1 1/8" socket and wrench. Again, just make sure to check the instructions for whichever one you end up with, and it should let you know what tools are going to be needed. And we are using a bigger 1/2" Milwaukee impact to speed this up, but if you would only just have 2 wrenches, you could still accomplish the same thing. Just going to take you a little bit longer. Truck's in position. We've just started lowering our ball down onto, or our coupler down onto our ball. So what we're going to want to do next is lock. We're going to try to lock the coupler as we're coming down. Once we get enough weight and the trailer shifts back a little bit. Once we got it lowered down onto the ball on there, like I said, we're just going to lock your coupler into place. If you've ever hooked up a trailer before, just know, if you're on a little bit of angled ground, backwards, forwards, sometimes it can kind of jam you up in here. It can help if you start the truck, bump it forward a little bit. Sometimes you can even kind of push on the trailer and just try to get it to where this goes down nice and smooth and locks onto that ball. Once that is locked down onto our ball, the next step, we're going to actually lift everything up higher than what you would think we need to do, and that's just to help us with putting these tension bars on and taking them off. So we're going to raise our tongue jack, and we are going to actually, like I said, we're going to lift it up a bit higher than what you would think you would need to do. One thing you can kind of look for as an indicator for when this is actually lifting up on the stinger, you will see the little gap right here in between the stinger and your coupler on your pickup. It's going to close that gap upwards. Okay, we have started lifting up on the truck and the trailer. Now this part, once you get it high enough, like I said, putting this bar on there should be pretty easy. They do come with a cheater bar as well, just to help you getting that spring bar loaded on there if there's still a lot of tension, like I said, just depending on the ground you're loading up on. There are times if the trailer's uneven side to side, the ground you're sitting on, one side might be really hard. Even though you lift it up high enough, that side's still hard to put on, and the other side seems a bit easier. Like I said, you do end up in situations like that where you're not on very level ground. But the spring bars on this style, you can see it's just got a locking channel on there. So we're going to slam it up into that receiver, and it's going to lock into place on there. So just like that. One thing I've always kind of done, if your feet are out of the way, I just kind of give them a nice little wiggle, make sure it's actually been locked into place. Again, the hitch that you have might be a bit different, locking your spring bar onto there. But the majority of them are this style where they're just going to slam up in there to lock in place. And then we're just going to see, so we're about, a good distance of being able to just lift that up there nice and easy. So we're going to see if we can get a little bit more height out of this tongue jack. This is something that having blocks underneath here can also help with, giving you that little bit of extra clearance. Okay, so like I said, I still was a little bit difficult putting it up there, but I was able to do it just without using the bar. If you end up in a spot where you cannot just get it up there manually, and this is going to be as high as you can lift that tongue jack, like I said, they do come with bars. Again, different styles will have a different way of putting it on there, but for this style, we are just going to come underneath your bar, and then you're going to put the tip of the bar into that square hole right there, and then we're going to use this as our lever to lift that up into place just like that. The next step would be, we have an L bracket. Again, the different styles will have different ways, but this style is just an L bracket that's going to sit down in that hole, and then there's an R clip that goes underneath to hold that in place. And that's just going to go just like that. Okay, so now that we got it all lowered down onto the weight is now on the spring bars and the hitch. We take a look at the trailer, and if you wanted to measure again, you could, but really just kind of looking at the level of the unit, you can usually kind of tell just by, as long as you're sitting on pretty level ground, that you have leveled your unit out. Now again, if you were to get to this point and your trailer seems too high in the front or too far down, it would be either adjusting at our brackets. If we needed to lower the trailer down some, we could do it that way, or we could move the actual ball and stinger as well. But there are the adjustments just to get us fine-tuned to level. All right, so like I said, once we have our trailer sitting at a good ride height right there, we're going to show you how to take this back off real quick. So we're just going to do the opposite of what we just did to get the bars on there. We are just going to start lifting the trailer by lowering the tongue jack. And as we lift, we're going to take the tension back off of the spring bars as we lift this back up. We're going to want to be around the same as you were when you put it on. So that's why I was kind of playing with this the whole time I was raising that up. A lot of times I just feeling for when I start to lose the tension off of that bar. Then like I said, it's just going to be the opposite. You're going to take your R clip out, take your L bracket off there, and then we're just taking this off. Now if we were not able to get this high enough and we still had tension on this bar after we've taken these off, then you can use the cheater bar in reverse, and it's just going to be taking your pointed end and wedging it down between the L bracket right here and the bar itself, and then popping it off of there using this guy just to pop it back off of there. You will want to be cautious of where you're standing doing that. Just there's tension on this while you're popping it off. You don't want to just be, you know, right in front of that knees or shins right close to it when it pops off of there. Once you have the bar off of the bracket, there's a couple ways you can remove these. Some of these styles you can just rotate this bar underneath. You can see it's just got the notch ends at a certain point. So if you're able to rotate it back far enough, some vehicles' exhaust will be in the way or the bumper. But if you're able to, you can just rotate it, and if not, get it back in there. You can see we do have this little clip that we can pull on right there, and it does the same thing where we can just drop it out that way. Now once your spring bars are off, we would just lower this back down, and we're going back down to get the weight back on the ball so we could just uncouple it. Okay, once you get it down far enough, you don't have to have the tongue jack raised all the way back up. You just have to get any of the tension that was on there from how high we had it raised. Now that the coupler's unlocked, then again, it's just raising your tongue jack or your trailer back up with the tongue jack until we come off of that ball. Now, there we go. So, once the trailer's removed off of there, then just make sure, obviously, that you have your breakaway cable and everything else has been disconnected before you pull the truck away. But that would be, like I said, setting up the hitch, how you actually hook up with that hitch. And like I said, just when you get to that certain point of testing, like I said, if we needed to, taking the measurements and then just adjusting everything else as needed to get us to ride level right there. One other thing, depending on the hitch you buy, again, said ours already came with a ball on there. I know there are some styles that when you buy the hitch, you have to put the ball on there. Just make sure, again, for your specific hitch, what you're looking at, the torque specs that need to be applied to the hardware that has to be installed after the fact on there as well. If you are looking at getting a weight distribution hitch of any kind, you can give us a call. We'll get you with one of our parts outfitters, and they could get you set up depending on the type of tow vehicle you have and the type of trailer you're going to be towing.
Thanks for watching. If this video didn't solve your problem, don't worry. We're here to help. Give us a call at 1-844-66-RVFix. We'll diagnose your issue quickly with a certified technician on a video call, get any parts and warranty processed, and if needed, we'll coordinate a service center or mobile technician to get you fixed. We'll handle it all so you can get back to camping.